Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. 5 months after Israel's war with Iran and with diplomacy seemingly frozen for the time being, the suspicion regarding the Islamic Republic's nuclear ambitions could soon lead to a renewed round of fighting between Jerusalem and Tehran, with Washington's role yet to be determined. The Iranians have not softened their refusal to abide by their international obligations. Some associates of the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic, namely Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, talk about leaving the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as acquiring warheads from abroad. And while they may be bluffing, Israel will surely not take this on good faith. So are the parties on the verge of round two? To dissect this matter, Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly Chief of the Intelligence Directorate at the Mossad. Great to see you, General.
Pleasure being here.
Also joining us is Mr. David Albright, the founding president of the Institute for Science and International Security. It's great to have you with us, sir.
Good to be here.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, are we on the verge of round two?
So if we can dispense with the, on the other hand, business, and try to guesstimate, as the British say, what is going to happen, I would venture a bet that we are going to see a new round. It is not inevitable, but right now the trend is towards a new round. It can be aborted. There can also be some round of diplomacy. We hear that Mohammed bin Salman, both before he went to the White House and after he came back to Riyadh, was given messages by Khamenei's confidants and relayed them back and forth. And if there is a meeting of the minds, yes, the war will be avoided. But right now, short of that, it seems as if the perception that Iran is obstinate enough to try something, Israel will not be able to take it in stride and just allow the Iranians some of their maneuvers. And therefore, as things stand right now, we are getting closer to a new confrontation.
Indeed. Well, let's establish first the framework to which the Islamic Republic of Iran is currently continuing in its discourse, particularly on a hostile approach on the one hand, but proactively also seeking to rearm itself. Some reports, including one on the New York Times, highlights that much of its arsenal has been replenished of surface-to-surface capabilities, namely ballistic missiles, while it is refusing entry to the International Atomic Energy Agency into the specific sites that were targeted from the B-2 bomber, so to speak, the nuclear sites that were obliterated, quote-unquote. Much has yet to be uncovered with regard to the highly enriched uranium, over 400 kilograms of some 60%, some may say even more than that. But to set the parameters on the nuclear file, let's turn to Mr. Albright. Where are we, and are the Iranians really that obstinate to test fate?
I think we're limited in what we can observe. Principally, we use satellite imagery and certainly follow the media and some of it you've quoted. What we see in the satellite imagery is that essentially the centrifuge program was destroyed, and Iran is just sort of letting everything lie as it was, with a few exceptions. They're not. There were three main sites: Natanz, Fordow, and Esfahan, and the Fordow looks like it's just been sealed up and left. Nothing really has been going on for months. Natanz is sort of in the same way, and even at Natanz, you have there's some equipment that wasn't destroyed that we didn't think was that valuable. Chillers as part of HVAC systems, they dispersed all over the site. to try to obviously make it harder to destroy it with one bomb. And Esfahan, the above ground site, is hardly shows massive destruction of buildings and almost no activity since then. And so you have at those sites very little happening. At mountain sites that were not attacked, one near Natanz called Pickaxe Mountain, and the other Esfahan tunnel complex near the main Esfahan site, there is activity going on. And I should say the Esfahan tunnel facility was heavily bombed by Tomahawk, so the entrances were pretty thoroughly destroyed. So let me correct that. Pickaxe Mountain, as far as we can tell, was not attacked, and construction continues. We didn't see any acceleration of that work, but we do see that they're nearly complete with the tunnel construction, at least, and the underground chamber construction. Esfahan Mountain, we see they reopened one tunnel entrance. We don't know if we assume they've gone in. They've put in some defensive measures, some chicanes that would stop Tomahawks coming straight at the door or the portal. I mean, you could come in at a higher angle with a missile and destroy the tunnel entrance. So it's not complete protection, but nonetheless, they appear to be trying to give the impression that they are working in these tunnel complexes that were not attacked, and Iran may perceive that they're somewhat invulnerable. On the weaponization side, you see that the sites that were attacked that are associated with making the nuclear weapon themselves, there is activity going on to clear the rubble, and it looks, and in some cases, rebuild or start to rebuild, recover equipment. So on that, so what you have is we don't think much is going on now. We do think they're still in shock about what happened and trying to make sense out of the next steps. But what they seem to be laying down as a foundation is to be able to work on some level of enrichment in deeply buried sites, and have some reconstituted nuclear weaponization capability in order to weaponize whatever they do with the enriched uranium. So I think it's not a good sign, and the directions are wrong, and the way the Iranians are doing it is, I think, elevating the chance that there will be round two.
So it does seem that way, indeed, and there's much discourse about this circulating on that. General Sofrin, naturally, intelligence is badly needed when we're talking about the unseens, so to speak, from those who have less access to what's happening behind closed doors in Iran. Naturally, Mossad has been quite instrumental in penetrating Iran's various ranks. The Iranians have tried to push back, but have been thus far at least clueless on whether or not they managed to close some of the holes that have been quite dug deep in its various ranks. What can you tell us about the current state of play, and to what degree should we be alarmed about Iran's actions and discourse?
I think that if you look at the broader picture about Iran, it has some what we call basic components. The first one is to try to restore its nuclear capabilities. They make it very slowly, not to use, but to raise high waves, not to draw the attention of the whole world, as Mr. Robert just mentioned right now. And they do it very slowly, and it will take time. That's a second, they rebuild or resupply themselves with ballistic missiles. And the rumors are that they have about 2,000 missiles. I don't know how many launchers are still valid, but the fact that they have about 2,000 missiles means that they are preparing themselves for the next round. They try to acquire from China and from Russia anti-aircraft batteries to protect themselves better than they used to do on the first round. That was in June. They are trying to get what we call advanced aircraft from China, mainly, to rebuild their capabilities because they didn't have any operational air force before this attack took place on June. And if you look even at the border circle, they're trying to establish what we call a new ring of fire around Israel. That means that now they're operational in Sudan. They're supplying weapon systems and they have their own presence in Sudan, which controls on the other side of what we call the Red Sea. On one hand, we have the Houthis in Yemen, and the other hand, they have Iranian presence very close to the what we call to the Red Sea. They're trying to destabilize the regime in Jordan and to smuggle weapon systems from the Jordan Valley into the Israeli side, and from there to Judea and Samaria, to rearm their proxies in Judea and Samaria, namely the Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And are trying to rebuild their capabilities to engage Israel in case something is going to happen. And they assess that Israel may launch what we call round two, because if they are not cooperating with the IAEA inspectors and they don't allow them to get and to look from very close range at their facilities, and they don't supply any answers about the stockpile of 400 and even more tons of enriched uranium, that means that they are now going what we call on the threshold and expecting something to happen. And so in a way, I feel even gambling that Israel will not launch an attack right now because of the American pressure on Gaza and other things as well. And the fact that the US government or the American administration is engaged now in attempts to restore or to bring to the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And they understand that the Americans are not available right now to attack Iran, and therefore they take advantage on that and going on the threshold.
Strolling.
Iran, of course, is academically very advanced. Universities there, scientists, but nevertheless, if you look at the defense angle, usually there is quite a correlation between the level of the intelligence services around the world and the special weapons activities in the same nations. You may say that if the intelligence services are high quality, you would expect that the same would go for the nuclear, biological, chemical work if there is one. Now, not only the counterintelligence work that the Iranians have shown regarding the Israeli and other Western intelligence penetrations into them, the counterintelligence was quite dismal. But you look at their intelligence work in Israel. It's so low quality as to be laughable. Every other day, you see a minor or some other person off the street being propositioned by Iranian intelligence. He's sent on test missions to paint graffiti on cars. Now, either this is the real low quality of Iranian intelligence,
Or it's a distraction.
yes, or this is what they want us to believe.
Right.
But one tends to believe that this is, up to now, this is their low level of intelligence. And if this is the case, they are at a disadvantage vis-a-vis Israeli, American, British, and other intelligence services. I know General Sofrin would not confirm it, but at least I have this feeling.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Albright, I'd like to touch on, we just had recently an IAEA Board of Governors meeting, during the course of which the Director General Rafael Grossi, of course, stated that he was optimistic, as he always states, about the engagement with the Iranians. Merely a day after the Iranians came back with their surprise response that, from their perspective, the Egyptian agreement, the meeting that, of course, was reached together with Abdelati and Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, to allow some access into Iran's nuclear infrastructure from Tehran's perspective is null and void. But nonetheless, it doesn't seem like America and the E3, Britain, France, and Germany, are pursuing a more vigorous approach to the Iranians, other than, of course, the maximum pressure campaign, then the various quite stringent sanctions that are being accumulated as we speak against Iran's various critical industries. What can you tell us about that? And is there some underpin to a more deliberate approach that can be brought forward?
I think at the IAEA, I mean, you're right. Director General Grossi is always optimistic. I mean, but nothing ever developed from that agreement, this Cairo agreement. It was dead before the Board of Governors meeting, and Ron had made it clear it wasn't going to let the IAEA in, and had all kinds of excuses. And they also tried to calm things down by saying basically all the nuclear material is sort of where it was, is at the sites. It hasn't been recovered. And Ron doesn't really know how much is there because it hasn't gone back into Fordow, and kind of implied it didn't go back into the Esfahan mountain complex where the highly enriched portions of the highly enriched uranium would be located. And so you had a situation that basically was the status quo was just kind of confirmed, that Iran's not going to let the IAEA inspect these materials, and the IAEA didn't have much hope of that anyway. Now, what was a little bit, again, Iran isn't always its best friend, is that it didn't have to. There was a board resolution. It was pretty mild. One of the main thing it really was trying to do was just set up that now that we're after snapback, we're going back to the pre-2015 days, and so the IAEA is going to now report quarterly based on the old UN Security Council resolutions. It's been reporting quarterly based on the nuclear deal, and so I think Iran reacted to just formally end this deal, this Cairo deal, but it was dead anyway. So it's Iran is escalating, and now I think probably the E3 and others are going to probably start reacting more in a more forward-leaning way. They were waiting to implement the snapback, not waiting, but implementing the snapback, getting the infrastructure in place. There's even talk of the Security Council of reconstituting the Iran panel of experts to look at the violations under the old rules. I mean, good luck on that, given you have to have consensus of the Security Council, but nonetheless, this whole apparatus where Iran's enrichment program is illegal, the UN sanctions are back, is being put together, and that takes some time, and Iran is as usual overreacting and leading to more escalation. And I think that's really what took place, is just more of attempts to establish a new framework that could lead to negotiations, but Iran, as usual, makes that very difficult.
Yes, they do. And General Sofrin, in that same line, since one of my main concerns, I won't go into my main concern, but one of my main concerns is that Iran would wait it out and start operating on building a nuclear payload device capable, of course, with its ballistic missile capabilities, a device that could be carried by a specific warhead with its very large arsenal. I mean, 2,000 ballistic missiles, it's not a small arsenal in any context. And in that, from that perspective, what are Israel's concerns in that? And would that not trigger a all-out reaction by Israel in the event that the Iranians would pursue such course of action, taking into account also the fact that the Iranians are deeply concerned and very careful due to the fact, as Mr. Oren mentioned, it is heavily penetrated by Israel's intelligence services?
I think that if you look at the Iranian reaction, for example, to what happened yesterday in Beirut, or the day before, meaning the elimination of Mr. Tabtabai, usually on what we call on other times before June 2025, maybe they will push Hezbollah to react. and to react forcefully against Israel. Hezbollah is weakened. Hezbollah cannot afford himself now to open a new confrontation with Israel. And the Iranians know it very well, and the Iranians don't push them too hard. Because Iran is also weakened right now compared to what used to be before June 2025. That means that the Iranians will be very careful right now not to raise, as I mentioned before, huge waves. That means that if they want to go on this direction, they will try to make it very slowly, very surely, to conceal every move they make. They have right now a huge problem because they don't have the ability to enrich more uranium up to 90%, which is needed for what we call to begin on building what we call the weapon systems. And therefore, we don't know of any other facility that they can use that for enriching more uranium for the highest level. And this is one provision. And the second one is that I'm not sure that they are now willing to attract the attention of the American administration, the E3, and Israel to make such moves, what we call openly, and to try to challenge us, all of us, because they know that this will surely will drag out the reaction coming out from mainly from the Israeli side, or even the Americans, the administration will cooperate one more time with us, and to try to demolish all the capabilities and to end this round for what we call for good, and to push their what we call nuclear ambitions up to several years ahead, 5 to 10, something like that. And they don't want to go into this collision right now, as I believe. So I believe that they will try to make it very slowly, to consider every move, and to make sure that if they choose this direction, it will be done without dragging the attention of the whole world.
Mr. Oren, you mentioned earlier Saudi Arabia with Abbas al-Araghchi, the Iranian top diplomat, of course, conveying messages to Washington through them. But if we broaden the discussion to other countries in the region, we see, of course, the Turks reaching a new agreement with South Korea about nuclear collaboration. We're seeing the Saudis with the Americans and other actors in the region very keen, including the Egyptians, on expanding their own nuclear infrastructure with the Russians at that. But what should we take into account from the nuclear dimension of Iran, and how does that impact the other actors in the region?
You remember the old Israeli line going back to the early 60s when Prime Minister Eshkol, Deputy Minister of Defense Peres, and others used to say, Israel will not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East, but neither will it be the second one. And this is a line adopted by the Saudis, by the Emiratis, by the Turks. They are all watching the Iranians. They are not trying to get ahead of the Iranians, but they don't want to stay behind. They obviously all have their infrastructure programs. Should the Iranians surprise and announce one day that they have the bomb, so will the others. And this is, of course, one of the main reasons all American administrations didn't want Iran to go nuclear. But you have to add to that the personal ambition of President Trump to be the peace president. He wants to negotiate something between Iran and Saudi Arabia, hopefully Iran and Israel. Otherwise, he will have a house of cards should the next Nobel Peace Prize Committee meet next October in Oslo. And this is right before the midterms. So maybe President Trump will make an extra effort to defuse the nuclear situation between Iran and its neighbors.
Indeed. Well, we're drawing near to the end of the program. I'd like to give each of you roughly 45 seconds to tell us where are we heading from here. But before we do, I'd like to encourage you, if you have not yet done so, go to the website of the Institute for Science and International Security of Mr. Albright. They have some of the best studies. I've been following them for years. And I'd really like to encourage you, if this is a topic that you've been following, and obviously if you've been following us, this is a topic that is very close to your heart, go to their website, look them up, and follow their very important research. Mr. Albright, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jonathan. I always appreciate the pitch. We do have a lot of information on the website. I think I'm worried. I mean, I'm worried that I agree with the general assessment that Iran will move very carefully, and slowly. I do think they were really set back and are reeling from that and trying to put pieces back together again. But they are moving, and I think they're getting a false impression that these underground sites, what we call Pickaxe Mountain and the Esfahan Tunnel Complex, are somehow invulnerable against strikes, and that in doing so, they may be inviting them. I mean, we don't want to have to worry that there's an underground enrichment plant that is taking the 60% and turning it into 90% without any supervision by outside forces other than what intelligence communities can muster. So there's a goal to have that basically not happen, not that we have to deal with it once it's happened.
Thank you, Mr. Albright. General Sofrin, closing sentence, if you may.
I think that we have to watch carefully what the Iranians are planning and what they're implementing. As I mentioned before, they're making a lot of efforts to rebuild their capabilities and their capacity and to engage Israel one more time with some kind of ring of fire, even smaller than used to be before, and to make sure that they are not going one more time to try to rebuild their capabilities and to establish what we call to try to organize or to build their nuclear device.
Thank you, General Sofrin, Mr. Albright, and Mr. Oren, for all of your very valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.